when we're talking about nutritional deficiencies, we're not simply talking about the fact that you're carrying a little bit extra weight around the midline. We're talking about, your exhaustion that you're facing, your lack of brain clarity, your lack of ability your short-term memory being shot, your feeling of being overwhelmed. All of these things, anxiety, depression, all of this is in a sense affected by your nutrition, and even the food that we're eating today, you want to eat more of it because it's addictive, but also because your body is saying, I'm not getting the nutrition I need to function.
That's exactly what's happening. So not only do we crave these foods, and not only do these foods stimulate central nervous system or brain centers of addiction that are triggered, that are affected by dopamine, but over time, the continual use of these foods causes our brain to become dopamine insensitive. And it makes us crave stimulation as opposed to craving creativity, intellectual pursuits, relationships with other people, camaraderie. Instead of pursuing healthy eating and healthy activities, we start to pursue stimulatory behavior. We try to stimulate the brain. And when the food doesn't do it enough because of dopamine insensitivity, we want to eat even more food. And we become overweight. And when that doesn't do it enough, we look to alcohol and we look to drugs. And what I'm saying here is fast food, processed food, sugar, and these fake foods are the gateway drug to more serious drug use and drug abuse. And surprisingly, and this is going to be, and people just don't even believe this statistic, but the most powerful causative factor with people who are incarcerated in federal prison. By the way, the majority of people who are incarcerated in federal prison today are there because of nonviolent drug-related crimes. And the link between drug-related criminal behavior and drug abuse is between candy and fast food more closely linked with any other parameter, more than poverty, more than bad parenting or lack of parenting, more than social isolation. The biggest parameter of studies in the medical literature and the scientific studies are consumption of candy, fast food, and processed foods in large amounts, and drug-seeking behavior and brain stimulation. And people, their careers don't matter, their families don't matter, being loving and considerate and working together to achieve great, to do good things in your life, and your ability to lead even prosperity and happiness don't matter as much as you find continuing your addiction to these processed foods and maintaining your disease. So maintaining your sicknesses, and it takes over part of the brain. And when people try to stop eating and stop eating unhealthily, they start to get shaky. They get anxiety now, and they get fatigued, and they get pain, stomach pain, and headaches. It's just like the addiction to cocaine or to opiates. You feel better when you're on the opiates. When the blood levels go down, you start to feel itchy and uncomfortable and anxiety, and you have to look for opiate addiction again. The same thing happens with food. Because when you're in the detox phase, when you're not eating these foods, your body tries to repair the damage. And repair and removal of toxic waste products is painful. It causes symptoms. And people recognize those symptoms as hunger. And they think they got to because food makes them feel better. So they're addicted to food, just like they're addicted to their drugs. And it leads to a vicious cycle that takes over their thought processes as well. In other words, they're no longer thinking logically and making the best decisions for their lives because their addictions control their delusion, control their thought processes, and they have irrational and delusional thoughts to maintain their addictions. Like the smoker will say, I'll quit when I get pregnant, or I'll quit, I'm stressed out right now, so I'll just smoke, I'll wait till my life becomes less stressful. And they don't recognize that being an addict makes you unable to deal with stresses in your life and unable to be intellectually creative and unable to be good at your job. And in other words, they don't see that their cigarette, that their opiates, that their food addiction is a partial contributor to their stress. It's not the solution to their stress. Or they'll say things like, I'd rather just die a shorter life and enjoy my life more with cigarettes, with cocaine, or with food, with poisonous foods. And they don't realize that these things diminish your smell, they diminish your taste, they don't make you enjoy life and food more, they make you enjoy life less, they make you live with fear. In other words, all of these excuses people have are what the brain does to maintain a person's addiction. And it takes over your control over your own life. And now we have these fast foods, which I call frankenfoods, controlling people's behavior instead of them being able to control the outcome of their own life.
It's fascinating. When I got off sugar years ago, and I've had problems most of my life. My stomach's doing better, but I got knocked this summer, and I'm still working on getting my microbiome in perfect order. But when I got off sugar years ago, and I was hypoglycemic for almost all of my life until recent years, what I found is I would say sugar begets sugar. If I would have the tiniest bit of sugar as I was working off, I'm talking years of working off, all of a sudden my body would go whoosh. And I realized, because my wife and I had made kombucha and kefirs, these probiotic drinks for ourselves, and then we actually sold them at farmers market years ago. I realized that you put a little bit of sugar into a kefir mix and the thing foams over. And it occurred to me that even my gut, my microbiome, my flora, has been addicted and is grown out of control based on its sugar addiction. So when I'm craving things, it may not even be me. It's those flora in there, the ones I don't want taking over, saying, Michael, do you realize you're hungry? You're shaky. You better get something right now, and it needs to be sweet.
Well, that's actually true, what you just said. And what people don't recognize, too, is that the food we eat affects the microbiome and affects the thickening and the adherence of the microbiome to the villi. In other words, there are 4 particular foods that help you thicken and make an adherent microbiome. And these 4 foods, of course, are 2 raw foods, which are green vegetables raw, particularly raw cruciferous greens like cabbage and kale and arugula, those type of greens, raw scallions and onions.
Cool.
And then the 2 cooked foods are cooked beans and cooked mushrooms. Now, this combination of foods leads to a microbiome that slows the absorption of glucose through the digestive tract wall. And what I'm saying right now is, when you have that mango or you have that apple, the glycemic effect, how fast the glucose goes into the bloodstream from the apple, has now been lowered because you have this thickened microbiome, because you've eaten this biofilm that thickened because you consume greens and mushrooms and onions. So it's not just the food you're eating at the time, it's the food you generally eat that affects, and because it creates bacteria that take a permanent residence there. So the regular consumption of these healthy foods make for a certain structure and function and type of bacteria. And the regular consumption of different other types of foods lead for different types of bacteria that actually promote toxins, inflammatory mediators, and things that promote atherosclerosis and even cancer. So bad bacteria leads to other bad things being produced, and good bacteria leads to other good things being produced. So other than taking a probiotic or a fermented food, it's much more effective to eat these vegetables and mushrooms, because when you take a probiotic or eat a fermented food, the bacteria don't adhere and take a permanent residence as well as when you just ate the right foods to have that happen.